guys have been around the channel for a hot minute, you'll know I love Spider-Man. So you can imagine how hyped I've been for the PS5 follow-up to the PS4 game that I was obsessed with. Now, for the illusion of full transparency, you probably shouldn't consider my opinions fair or unbiased. I mean, I have bought the last 3 games from Insomniac twice each. I've bought the collector's edition for both Spider-Man 1 and 2. I 100%ed the game in about 4 days, and I put myself in the emergency room because I tried to shove 19 inches of venom up my ass because I'm that committed to the bit. But, get it? I still think it's worth your time. The game's mission statement this time seems to be double up. Double the amount of playable Spider-Man, double the map size, double the amount of actors who have played Ben 10. That's a weird fact I've been sitting on. But more importantly, it doubled down on the earnest character-driven narratives of the previous games. What do I mean? Well, outside the Raimi and Spider-Verse movies, the scale in Spider-Man's stories always ramps up, but it never really feels like it serves the narrative. It's sizzle, not steak. However, Insomniac never just goes for scale without justification, so you can imagine my surprise when the first thing you do in this game is fight a Sandman so big he'd make Godzilla feel like a bitch, and his primary attack is shooting sandstorms at you. This is to establish that if these two Spider-Men work together, there's no threat they can't overcome. So of course they'll be separated for the rest of the game. But it also sets the idea that the upcoming enemies are even more dangerous than this monstrosity. Before we go any further, I'm going to throw up a light spoiler warning. I'm doing this primarily because I want everybody to enjoy the game with as fresh a view as possible. But also because the amount of spoilers around this game were ridiculous. Like, the entire game posted 2 days before release. That's just a dick move. And if you're someone who did this, you do deserve to have myriad annoyances visit you. Like, you go to the shop and find out your favorite snacks have been discontinued, or stubbing your toe 3 times more than you currently do, or I don't know, like gambling on a fart and losing next time you're on a really important date or meeting. Oh god, no. Much like the prior game, the major themes act as a tagline: be greater together. Well, for the heroes, this means relying on others and accepting when you need help. For Kraven, however, it means using people in any way, shape, or form to get what he wants and to make out that everyone else is the problem. Reminds me of some other Predators.
I'm not a groomer. I'm just a loser.
He also comes with his own paramilitary group that aid him in his quest, like your classic comic book supervillains usually do. But what's interesting is that unlike a lot of other henchmen who are controlled by fear, Kraven's people are devoutly committed to him, viewing him as some sort of god figure to aspire to. They also seem to consist of every creed and nationality, all working together to achieve Kraven's will. You really get the sense that he's fostered a community amongst the hunters that feel he's liberated them from regular society, that no doubt shun them for being psychotic lunatics. But what's kinda hilarious is Kraven does not seem to regard them in the slightest. Kinda like my current relationship with my dad. Dad! There are only 2 scenes in the entire game where Kraven is seen with his hunters. The opening cutscene and another at the halfway point. Every other scene he's in, he's shot completely alone, and even in those 2 scenes, he's always standing apart from them, literally keeping them at arm's length. But why would he do that though? Well, it's because none of them can give him what he truly wants. A fight to the death that justifies his existence, and a chance to find another apex predator like himself and to not die alone. I wouldn't say he's a sympathetic villain, but there's something far more somber to him that we haven't really seen before in superhero media, especially when you find out why he's doing all this. However, Kraven isn't the only bad guy in the game warping its positive themes. Venom is also here. Venom can be a bit of a divisive character. You either love him or hate him. Personally, I think the Black Suit story arc is one of the most interesting and important stories for the character of Spider-Man. It's an allusion to toxic relationships and addiction, but it's also a stark reminder that Peter Parker is human and just as prone to mistakes as we are. Venom himself is something of an allegory for the devil, an all-corrupting force that promises you whatever you want, but at the cost of your own humanity and making you unrecognizable to everyone around you. It gives power, but at the cost of responsibility, which is what makes Venom such a great antithesis to Spider-Man. All that said, I hate Venom.
You are a loser.
To be fair, it's not totally his fault. Rather, it's a case of oversaturating the character to the point that any of the stuff I just talked about has kind of been obliterated over time. 5 years after he was introduced, they pivoted to make him an anti-hero, which is strange given the fact that in his tenure as a villain, his signature move was eating people. He's also shown up so numerously that the novelty of him is kind of worn off. But I am so happy to say that Spider-Man 2 is one of the best depictions of the character, including every good thing from the character's history with some really surprising inclusions. Like, if you had told me prior to release the game's third act was going to be a spiritual remake of Web of Shadows with the cosmic horror of Donny Cates' run on Venom, I wouldn't have believed you. Insomniac just understands what makes Venom such a compelling character. Although called a symbiote, it's undoubtedly a parasite, much like my ex. And like her, it forces you to lash out at your friends and family, makes you believe you're nothing without them, while warping your wants to be theirs, and its only redeeming feature is that they know how to use their tongue. I should call her. What I really like about the symbiote in this game is how much time they've dedicated to establishing it. Hell, if you're doing all the game's activities as they show up, you don't even get the black suit till the halfway point of the game. I love how ballsy this is because A, they advertised the symbiote so much before release, and B, because they seem to know with Venom, less is more. Plus, Venom alone will make most people stick with the game, and that freedom really allows all the other plot points to breathe before introducing the angry alien sea urchin to the mix. Hell, when you finally get it, you can still partake in side activities, crime busting, and Peter has probably one of his best one-liners ever while wearing the symbiote.
Okay, before we get down to business, there's something I have to tell you. I'm fresh out of honey.
The game knows that if it did a Bully Maguire and had the first thing you do in the black suit be a violent murder, then everyone around Peter might just twig something was up. Instead, Peter's transformation is a lot more gradual and subtle. In fact, in a lot of cases, you could see why Peter would be standoffish or angry. Without spoiling anything, how he even ends up in the suit in the first place would rightly leave most people pretty angry. This is all kind of classic Black Suit Saga stuff. However, what Insomniac blends into the mix is such a great addition, I'm honestly surprised no one has properly explored it before. Body horror. From having the suit's black tendrils violently shoot out of Peter's body for combat, controlling him while he's asleep, and going feral, to healing him in the most painful way possible, there's constantly this sense this shouldn't be on Spider-Man. But there's also this amazing bit of visual storytelling to go with it. Initially, it has this body armor design denoting its ability to preserve its host and make them stronger. However, it has these segments on the suit that are composed of tendrils that look like exposed muscle fiber, reminding you that this is a living thing that's wrapped around Peter's entire body. And during close-ups, you'll notice that they seem to be moving, probing for a chance to dig deeper into its host. It also has this wet texture that initially I wasn't crazy about, but given that it's an evil alien, it makes sense that it would be unsettling to look at in some regard. Later on, after some story stuff, the suit transforms and almost looks like burnt skin that seems to have almost seared itself into Peter as if the two are becoming one, and its spider symbol becomes more jagged and demonic. Not only is it a visual progression to Venom that kind of eases you in, but it's almost like the symbiote is in some kind of incubation period. This giant hulking monstrosity isn't so much what happens when someone else wears the suit, but a logical endpoint to its development. It kind of reminds me of the xenomorphs in Alien and how they work, and I love that. You also gradually see how it twists its host's mind as Peter becomes dismissive of those around him and increasingly aggressive and standoffish, relying on the suit far more than he should. At first, using it in combat for its superior hentai love interest powers, but eventually Pete relies on it for simple things like handing someone a shirt in the creepiest way possible, all culminating in one of the most unnerving line deliveries in any game.
Which means it's more dangerous than I could have imagined. We need to call Oscorp. We need to destroy it.
Destroy us?
Yuri Lowenthal deserves a performance award for this game or something. Like, he don't miss, man. Couple that with an MJ section that wouldn't feel amiss in a Resident Evil game, and you see how sinister the symbiote can be. But what's really interesting is how the symbiote is also a direct contrast to Kraven. While Kraven is looking for an equal to end his life, the symbiote is just looking for any way to continue its existence. One is trying to justify their life through their death, and the other one is justifying their life through just existing. If Kraven was melancholic, the symbiote is just pathetic. It doesn't want to create or innovate, just to exist with no higher purpose or aspirations. It's a really great use of the antagonists that elevates them to tools that serve the game's story, and nowhere is this more visible than the Lizard. Now I'll admit, I've never really been a huge fan of the Lizard, but can you blame me when this is what I've been working with?
Could you tell me how to kill a giant lizard? Why do you want to know about lizards? Lizards are they're the greatest.
I wish I was a lizard. I am a lizard.
It's not exactly compelling, is it? Here, however, he's a cautionary tale for Peter. Both he and Kurt adopt the symbiote and lizard abilities with good intentions, but Kurt knows that's a road to hell. It costs him his family, his life, hell, he even loses control over his body. Sounds familiar. He's the only person that knows just how dangerous this power is, and is one of the first people to beg Spider-Man to cast it off. Couple that with his and his wife's design being eerily similar to Peter and MJ's and a prior connection to Venom, and he has become far more compelling to me as a fan. However, what's really interesting about Venom is he's not bringing out anything in Peter that isn't already there. All Spider-Man has done is take more and more from him, and even when he does the right thing, he still loses. It's why Peter is the perfect host for the symbiote, because the promise to have the power to save everyone is the perfect hook for someone with as much survivor's guilt as him. However, Peter isn't the only one struggling with dark thoughts. Miles too struggles with darker impulses when Mr. Negative, his father's killer, escapes, and he struggles with thoughts of revenge and wanting to kill the man who destroyed his family. It's a great allusion to Peter's initial trial of facing Uncle Ben's killer, while also reminding you that both our heroes are human. They make mistakes and struggle with dark thoughts like us all, and I think it's important to remind people that their idols aren't perfect. It's also always been at the core of the character. Just because you make a mistake doesn't mean you can't come back from it and be a better person. And that's always been what makes Spider-Man so great, and isn't just a lesson that we see learned by our heroes, as we see from Tombstone and Prowler. Despite their tenured career as supervillains, they're trying their best to make amends like our heroes. Funnily enough, Mysterio puts it best.
Mysterio will always be a villain, just as Spider-Man will always be a hero. It's when you start looking at the people behind the masks that things get messy.
Yeah, Mysterio, who in the last Spider-Man 2 was an OC cosplaying loser you take out in a single punch, has one of the realest moments in the game. They're not just here to explain the themes, but present the idea early on that if they can be redeemed, so too can the Spider-Men for their mistakes. It's a story I could only really see taking place with Spider-Man's rogues, as his enemies have always felt a bit more relatable than Batman or Superman's. So to see them trying to do their best and leave behind their role as the bad guys is really kinda sweet. And at the end of the day, they're just people too. It reminds me of that bit in Daredevil Season 2 where he tells the Punisher why he doesn't kill.
The people you murdered deserve another chance.
What, to kill again, rape again? Is that what
No,
you
Frank,
want?
to try again, Frank. To try.
Speaking of Daredevil, my boy John Paseo is back to compose the music, and he totally crushed it yet again. The title theme is the perfect marriage of the prior two games, having that uplifting choir and string sections that builds into this really amazing crescendo before settling into the more hip-hop style drums from the second game. Not only does it combine the last two games' themes together beautifully, but it really conveys how in sync both Spider-Men are. However, the real show stealer here is Kraven's theme. It's aggressive and foreboding, and it feels like the drop almost sneaks up on you. Couple that with the drums that sound like marching and the war chant like vocals, and it's just a great distillation of the character in audio alone. Seriously, listen to this. Now, it would be very easy for Insomniac to just go bigger, and they do in a lot of cases, but they also keep the spiders close to the ground with a lot of friendly neighborhood missions. Whether it be helping a kid ask someone to prom, finding someone's grandparent who's wandered off, or just rehousing Howard's birds, none of it feels beneath them, and in the case of those latter two missions I mentioned, they have really nice moments where you just sit with them. Not only does it keep that looking out for the little guy mentality, but it makes Peter acting like a feral animal far more jarring. What about the gameplay? Combat is a much more involved affair this time around. Unlike previous games in the series, enemies don't just wait for their turn to hit you, they jump your ass like you're a Jujutsu Kaisen villain.
Fight back! Fight back!
sword wielders with AoE attacks, drones that fight you in the air, exploding robot dogs that are super aggressive and can disable your abilities and gadgets, and anti-air defenses stopping you from engaging in the air combat, which was something that could completely destroy the flow of combat in the last two games. Initially, combat is controlled entirely by the enemies, but once you have a grasp on it, you can be way more aggressive than the previous games ever allowed. One really great addition was changing the suit powers from instant win abilities to cooldown ones. Not only does this highlight the different Spidey's unique abilities, but it makes combat a visual spectacle while also making you aware of your positioning and how to maximize their usage. Coupled with the far more stingy focus bar, which needs to be full to heal you unlike the previous games, and combat has been elevated to a much more involved affair. Speaking of improvements, traversal, bringing back all that was great from the prior games, but with a new addition I cannot live without in these games: gliding. No longer were Insomniac content to just take Arkham's combat, now they've pinned them down, clipped its wings, and taken them for themselves. All joking aside, the gliding is actually way different to how it would function in something like Arkham. It's mainly there to augment the web swinging and maintain your speed, rather than being a singular means of traversal, finding particular use when crossing the bodies of water between Manhattan and Brooklyn. Wind tunnels in the city act almost like mini fast travel spots, however using them for a quick speed boost or a free bit of elevation really becomes a skill in and of itself. It feels so seamless in the game that I honestly felt lost without it during the opening of my second playthrough. I'm just so taken aback they were able to innovate on a system I believe had been perfected in Miles Morales. I mean, hell, that game brought all the exaggerated swagger of a black teen. Can you believe someone at GameSpot got paid to write that? Speaking of swagger, can we talk about the costumes? Some of the finest spider fashion I have ever seen. And whatever the hell this is. Aside from that, mwah! Chef's kiss. There are 68 costumes between the two Spider-Men, however with the new suit style system, this number shoots to 200. Now admittedly, it's just an extra 3 palette swaps for some of the comic suits, but some of these color swaps are so good, I'm baffled they aren't the default look, and some are so diabolically bad, they look like Spider-Man moonlights as a rejected McDonald's mascot.
How will he get a kiss? Very ugly, no kiss for him!
But even those are fun in their own way, and ultimately, I think that's what Insomniac wanted to pull off. A fun, true-to-form outing for fans of the webheads. A game so polished and refined that other games in its genre are being held to its standard. I feel like it's done for superhero games what Spider-Verse has done for superhero movies, creating something that is great without the asterisks for a superhero game, that's raised not just spectacle, but emotional stakes. And honestly, I could go on for hours why I love it, and trust me, I had to cut a lot from the script to make it at least semi-coherent, and honestly this level of self-indulgence is a slippery slope that ends in me financially shaming my fans and doxing detractors, and honestly I'm not hot enough to get away with that. Is it a perfect game? No. It's a little on the short side, the focus on 2 characters causes it to be a little less focused than the prior games, and honestly, I think MJ got shafted in this game. Yeah, the weakest aspect of the last game becomes some of the best part of this game, mainly because now she's saying fuck stealth with her sidekick, a gun. And for as good a depiction of Kraven as this is, and trust me it's the best we're gonna get for a while, it's missing one of his most iconic features. Laser nipples! And I ran into a handful of glitches in my 60 hours of playtime. However, at its worst, it's just more Spider-Man. Considering that the last 2 are some of my favorite games, that's more of a strength than a weakness. And honestly, with the movement improvements here, I think I'll find it hard to go back to those prior games on web swinging alone. But what do you guys think? Is Spider-Man 2 just overhyped? Did you think it's better than the last 2 games? Does it make you more excited for Insomniac's Wolverine game? Let me know in the comments. Like and subscribe. Sorry for the lack of uploads. Like, life got away from me and I kind of got bummed after the last video didn't do as well as I thought it would. That's stupid and I shouldn't care, but I do. Anyway, tip your waitresses, tell your mom I said hi, and I'll see you in the next one.